Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Marsh, Events and Marketing Manager at the Greater Concord Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much for joining this webinar this morning. Before we dig in, I want to let you know that this session is recorded and it will be emailed out to all of those who registered. So you can watch it later, share it with a friend, look back on details that, really piqued your interest. But since you're here live right now, you can submit questions during the presentation that our presenters will answer. So to do that, you want to either tap your screen or move your mouse a little bit, and you'll see this button called Q&A pop up. From there, you're just going to simply type in your question, and it will be seen by our presenters here today. So again, to send a question, click on Q&A and just type it in, and we'll keep an eye on them. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jayme and Robin. Thank you so much for being here today and giving this great presentation for us.
Thank you, Emily. And Robin is just getting things in order to join us. And I just want to say welcome to everybody. It's a pleasure. I can't see you, but I know you're there. My name is Jayme Simões. I am a board member of the Concord Chamber of Commerce, and I also work at Louis Karno Company Communications here in Concord. I'm also on the Creative Economy Task Force, along with Byron Champlin. I see Robin is showing her face. Welcome.
Here I am.
I'm going to take you off this. Robin and I have worked together for many years. We have kind of sister firms that share so much work in research and corporate and nonprofit communications. It's always a pleasure to see your smiling countenance, Robin. How are you today?
Well, how are you doing?
I can't complain. So I just described myself. I'll let you introduce yourself before we get into the program.
Okay, great. Well, Robin Schell, I'm a senior partner and counsel at a firm called Jackson Jackson Wagner. A lot of people think that's a law firm just by the sound of it, but we're actually a behavioral, public relations, and management consulting firm. We are based in the Seacoast, but we serve clients all over, from very small nonprofits to Fortune 50 companies. So very happy to be here today to talk about designing effective social responsibility programs with Jayme, and I'll let him take it away by starting us off.
Thank you, Robin, and thank you, everybody. I know that we've all had a lot of Zooms over the last year, but we think this is a really important one. One of the reasons we decided to do this program for you is we know that a social responsibility program, a special feature, a special effort by an organization used to be kind of a nice amenity, something we would offer to kind of express our values. But the world has changed, and it's changed a lot in the last 14 months. And today, it's gone from being kind of a nice amenity to being really crucial in defining who you are, what your brand is, what you care about, and most of all, attracting market share, attracting partners, attracting folks who are going to volunteer. Why has this happened? I mean, that's a good question. Obviously, COVID-19 is the number one reason. It has changed not simply the way we do things, it's changed everything about life. And we've all spent more time with our families, at home, online, and we've really started to question and analyze things more. As a result, we look at the organizations that we have transactions with. We look at the companies that we do business with, the nonprofits that we support. And what does that mean? We now ask, what are they giving back, right? Because we've all sacrificed something. Some people have sacrificed everything. So we're looking for some sort of level to understand our partners, be they on the nonprofit level, be they on the economic level. There's a heightened social awareness. This is just part of the new world that we live in. Part of that is driven by the political divisions that we've seen over the last years, where everything is kind of hypersensitive and very touchy. But we've also seen a very divided society on all kinds of levels here in the United States, all kinds of conflicts, all kinds of social unrest. And again, that has bubbled up, and we've seen that spilling over into the corporate world and the nonprofit world. And then there are the millennials. They're coming of age now, and they're coming into a point where they have a very large role to play in our society and where we're going together as a country. millennials have always had a heightened social awareness, and they brought that with them as they've matured, as they become a bigger part of the economy. So millennials are now getting closer to really driving that bus, and they really question, what do the companies, the organizations that we have transactions with, that we do business with, what do they believe in? And do we share common values? So if there's one thing that's clear about a crisis, it is an opportunity, and it is also a threat. And I think if we all discussed it, we could say that we've seen lots of organizations that have stepped up to the opportunity, that have worked harder, that have changed the way they're doing things, that have expressed their values in a way that they didn't do before. And there's others that just haven't, that have shrunk, like a weed at night. I think, as an example, the Concord Chamber is a great, I was before on the call, the things the Chamber has done to support the community, to speak out on causes, to be more active, that shows the opportunity being stepped up to. So this is why we're doing this workshop with you today, to help you understand how this isn't just a nice amenity, it's a competitive advantage. And look, we've based it on research. And this is interesting because of all the research we're going to share here, these are from different sources. This is not just one source we're looking at. And what's interesting is when you see, 80, 70% of Americans saying that they agree on something, then we're talking about pulling from across the political spectrum, all different lifestyles, beliefs, values, geographic regions. I think that that's a very important point to make right now. So look at this, 88% of Americans today are more willing to forgive a company or an organization for making a mistake if it genuinely tries to change. That's pretty interesting. I mean, I remember the Ford Firestone crisis of years ago. People weren't as forgiving. So we've become more forgiving if we feel that somebody is genuinely trying to do things in a different and better way, and that that they are less likely to cancel an order from a company that is purpose-driven. I think that's new as well. 73% of respondents believe that a company can take actions that both increase profits and improve conditions in the communities where it operates. That's a huge number. And so we look at those two things, it tells us not only has society changed, but people are really more tuned in and trying to understand the background of an organization, how it interacts on a social level, not simply an economic level. This is interesting. 72% of Americans say that they feel it is more important now than ever that the companies they buy from reflect their values. Now think about 10 years ago, if you went shopping at JCPenney or Target, did you question what that organization believed in, how that organization gave back? Probably not as much as you do today, as you question with Amazon, for example, where we hear a lot about the company and its ownership, more so than we hear about its products and services. 76% say that supporting companies that are addressing social and environmental issues helps them to feel that they're doing their part as well. So think about this as vicarious action. So I will buy from Whole Foods because I know that Whole Foods supports local farmers, is trying to reduce plastic, is trying to lower methane. I feel a connection with that organization. And 9 in 10 consumers, 86%, they're likely to purchase from a purpose-driven company. These are huge numbers. So to my original point, this isn't a luxury anymore. This is a brand definer. And we think about one of the big changes that's happened over the last couple of years with changes to the tax law. If you're a nonprofit, we know that people are less incentivized now to make donations to nonprofits. So it's really more about mission and the ability of a nonprofit to clearly define its mission and clearly integrate itself in what it does, or for a for-profit, big or small. And we're going to talk about some bigger organizations today, for a for-profit to show that they're not just in business to make money, they're in business to do well and to do good. So on that note, I've teed it up for Robin. I'll pass the.
Thank you, Jayme. Good stouts there. And I don't think any of us on this call are questioning the value of a corporate social responsibility program. But when we're called in to help clients, these are some of the questions that we start with, right? The first question we ask is, well, are you giving where you get? Are you very visible in the areas where your employees live and work, where your customers live and work? Are you supporting those kinds of causes that have a connection to your business? Do you do more than just write the check? And I think we've all seen the photo ops with the giant checks, and there's nothing wrong with those, by the way. But the most effective programs go beyond just that big check, right? I was talking about the fact that I ride in the Pan Mass Challenge, and Billy Starr, who's the head of that whole effort to raise money for Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, he, does the big photo op with the $58 million check, but he does so much more than that in terms of engaging all of us that raise money for Dana-Farber. I happen to be on a team that raises money for lung cancer, so we're very involved that way. He makes opportunities for his fundraisers to meet the doctors at Dana-Farber and hear about the clinical trials that we're raising money for. So it goes way beyond that photo op of just that check. The next question, and this is a good one for all of you to be asking yourselves: do you practice focused philanthropy, or are the causes that you support kind of all over the map? And it's easy to get in a situation where they're all over the map if leadership has changed and you've kind of changed focuses as an organization over time. One of the examples that comes to my mind, Lockheed Martin a number of years ago kind of found themselves in that situation where things had grown all over the place. Their various presidents had picked different causes to support, and they finally said, nope, we're gonna do an assessment of where our money's going. We're going to do some research to figure out what's really the most important thing to us. And they were able to narrow it down. Clearly, if you're Lockheed Martin, you have a vested interest in supporting STEM programs, right? So all the engineering and mathematics students that are feeding their future job pipeline. So that's an area for them, as well as military and veteran. And one of the things I like about the way that they did it is when they came to that conclusion, they gave a 3-year heads up to a lot of the organizations they had been supporting in the past. And they said, look, we're going to narrow our focus, but we're not going to leave you in the cold. We're going to give you, X% the first year. We're going to give you a little bit less the second year and a little bit less the third year. And by the third year, hopefully you've made some plans to, replace our support. So focused philanthropy. Even if you're all over the map, you can still have an opportunity to rein that in. Do your social responsibility practices engage employees? Do you have opportunities not just to write the check to, say, a Habitat for Humanity if you happen to be a construction company, but do you actually involve your employees in the build? Are you creating trips for them? That kind of thing where they can participate on their own. The next question is, do you have a social responsibility policy? And for those who don't but would like to have them, and you're interested in having an example of what kind of policies are out there, just message Jayme or me and we'll be happy to share those offline. We'll be able to email some examples to you. But it is really important because it not only focuses for people where the giving organization is focusing, but it's also very helpful for those applying for grants. You're not going to waste your time if you know that organization only supports these kinds of things. So a really good social responsibility policy will make it clear the kinds of things they do and don't support. And then finally, one of the questions a lot of people ask themselves is, are you known as a socially responsible company? Well, there's a couple of ways to find that out. One of the great ways is when you end up on one of those top 10 lists of corporate social responsibility rock stars, right? And they have them, lots of different organizations do those kinds of things. So that's one way, but you can also do some research with your own stakeholders and ask them questions like, on corporate social responsibility, what kind of grade would you give our company and why do you say that? And see if they are aware of some of your signature programs. Next slide, please, Jayme.
Robin, can I just interrupt here because we have a question and I think it applies to what you've just been talking. If you don't mind, I'll read it to you. It's a really good question. And the writer says, our organization likes to support our employees to allow them to volunteer where they have passions. And then we often support those organizations financially. Plus, we feel committed to the full community. Is it okay if we are all over the map?
Okay, that's a great question. I was actually going to talk a little bit further about the fact, though, that your employees are a key stakeholder. And actually, JJ&W always did that same thing. They said, if you have something you're passionate about, we're going to support you because you work for this company. And, you know, a lot of the times the employees do live and work in the places where you know, do your business. So that's a little bit of a different story. So I would say yes, in that case, if it is engaging your employees, which is half of what this presentation is about, then that is absolutely fine.
I would add that, you know, the model that not everyone may be familiar with anymore, but Public Service New Hampshire had used that kind of model to rebuild its reputation after Seabrook. And, you know, they had everybody who was an active manager was on a nonprofit, and they broke it, and also on for-profit boards. And so it seemed like, you know, they were doing what you're doing, the person who asked the question, reaching out to all these organizations. But there was a strategy there, and it was a smart strategy. They kind of show themselves to be an integral part of the state of New Hampshire in the 90s. They really rebuilt their organization. They gave a lot of real money to help nonprofits get on their feet. They gave them direction. And, you know, I think that was a smart strategy. So they thought about it. They had a plan. They approached it professionally, and they gave a lot to the communities, but they also got something in return. So it was a smart trade.
Good question. Thank you for that. I'll go to the next slide, please, Jayme. So on the subject of how do they get all over the map, it's usually when you have this series of leadership changes and the CEO is adopting their pet project. And that's where you end up taking a number of lefts and rights. And so I think if you're pinning it much more on your corporate or organizational values and your mission and your vision, that's going to be a lot more steady than just whoever's in the chair, what they think would be a good idea to support. So next slide, Jayme. So what are the ways that a social responsibility program can make a positive impact? And it's, as I said before, it's way more than that big check. It's way more than just the donations. A lot of organizations do some brilliant things with in-kind support. We've certainly seen that through COVID, that people can give products and services that can be helpful during this time. They've been doing it. Advocacy, and Jayme is going to talk a little bit about Starbucks a little bit, you know, how they really gin up their whole advocacy program to engage and involve employees, and they have picked specific areas where they have chosen to shape that public policy. Volunteer hours. Here's a question for you. How many of you track your volunteer hours of either your employees or sometimes members of your extended family give and do some kind of report out on that, on a specific social responsibility report? Because a lot of organizations are doing that now. And one of our clients that we worked with for many years, Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA, they're huge, of course. And the interesting thing about them is not only do they have a lot of employees, they have a lot of retirees, and they have a special program that allows the retirees to volunteer on their behalf. And it's brilliant because there's so many of them. And of course, the great thing about it, retirees, they have the time, right? They have the time to volunteer. So that's a question to ask yourself. How am I engaging my employees and somehow calculating the number of hours they're doing? Board service, and John kind of alluded to this, but we talk a lot about if you want to engage and involve your employees and you want to form relationships with specific other organizations, nonprofits, for example, then what better way to place your employee on that board and really get to know that organization and support them, not only financially, but with your service as well. And then finally, developing products and services that address any kind of societal need. And we've certainly seen that a lot during this COVID era as well. Next slide, Jayme, please. So back to the subject of if you don't have a social responsibility policy, but you're thinking of writing one or at least revamping the one you've got, many times the things that are involved, your corporate philosophies and beliefs are laid out there so that people can understand this is why we are giving where we are, and complete clarity on the causes that you do and don't support. Timberland has Timberland that I'm going to talk about in a minute has a good handle on that, and their list of who they don't support is way longer than who they do support, so they make it pretty clear. And then is there going to be any kind of employee engagement element in that? Are you going to, as the person who asked the question, set something up where you allow your employees to volunteer on company time, for example, or you pay for their membership to that specific organization that they support? Next slide. So just to give you a couple of examples, and this company is actually relatively small, from my hometown in Amesbury, a good friend of mine, Bob DeFazio, who is a retired Navy veteran. He had a lot of success in the data center world, and then he decided for his second career, he was going to go into the retail cannabis business. So he has only been in business. He opened his first store last November and opened his second store in Haverhill in January. And yet he has already really made it clear that he is a veteran-owned business and he is going to support veteran-owned or veteran causes. And they've done a lot of work with the Veteran Northeast Outreach Center. Employees periodically will go down to Dorchester and work on the trucks and load up the trucks with food for the food bank. And then they also have, I think this is a cool program, something called the Snow Angels, where, and it's nothing fancy, Bob DeFazio, the CEO, gets right out there alongside his employees. When there's a snowstorm, they go out there and they clear the driveways for all the seniors in Haverhill and Amesbury who wouldn't otherwise be able to get out of their driveways. So something that simple for a small organization is good. And then another little visible thing they do, when you're going into the store to make your purchase, mostly that people are using cash, so they have a little charity of the month jar, and you can throw the rest of your change in there and it ends up adding up. So for a small organization, they do quite a bit in terms of philanthropy. Next slide, Jayme. Of course, most of you, since you're in New Hampshire, have heard of Timberland, VF, who bought them a couple of years ago. They certainly, though, kept a lot of Timberland's flagship programs, and they have always had this program called Path of Service, and they established it back in 1992. And this is really kind of above and beyond. They give each employee up to 40 paid hours per year to give back in the community in some way, shape, or form. And then for those employees that might not have their own thing, but they still want to contribute, the company sets up something called Servapalooza. So it's 2 days during the year where a lot of different Timberland employees are volunteering and working together on anything from a revamp of a playground to it could be some kind of garden project or doing some kind of environmental project, planting trees, all of that. So, and obviously Earth Day is a huge, I just was on their site recently looking at some of their messages about Earth Day. They do an excellent job, and it makes sense because they make lots of outdoor equipment and clothing. So next slide, Jayme. So this one, I really like their Timberland Victory Garden, and they established this back in 2008. And it's kind of a full circle thing. So the employees get a chance to work in the Victory Garden, which is right there at Timberland. And then with no pesticides, fresh produce is then either sold back to the employees or it's used at the employee cafe. And then the proceeds of that are donated to the New Hampshire Food Bank. So it's a pretty good program. Next slide, Jayme. There we go. And this is another one that I think is pretty clever. So they took something called the Generation T Pledge, and that is really supporting and changing the perception of the trades, trying to encourage more folks to go into the trades. And recently they did a very good program in Massachusetts where they did it at the Milford High School. And it was a bunch of students in this Milford High School gym. They had companies like East Coast Flooring and Lowe's and companies like that who provided the materials, who provided the time to work with the students to show them what to do. And they built 24 dog kennels during this time. The dog kennels were then donated to an animal shelter, so that was terrific. And then the top 15 employees were actually offered opportunities to work at the, or intern at the East Coast Flooring. So there was something in it for the East Coast Flooring folks too. They were, you know, getting employees, which in this day and age is not exactly always an easy thing to get. So a couple of innovative programs by Timberland. Next slide, Jayme, please. This one, a really good colleague of ours who actually, Clark Dumont, possibly some of you might have known him when he was in New Hampshire, but he ended up in Vegas working for MGM Resorts. And this is a huge global entertainment company that had gone through a lot of changes and a lot of, you know, opportunities where things were changing the leadership. So they said, we've really got to go back to square one and try and rebuild our reputation a little. So they decided to focus on the pillars of environmental sustainability, diversity and inclusion, and community engagement. They had all kinds of programs that were designed to make a difference in the lives of employees, guests, and in the communities where they operate, back to our point of giving where you get. And sure enough, within a few years, they ended up on the 2013 Fortune Most Admired Companies, and then recently, 2021 Social Responsibility Gold Award for all the stuff they had done during COVID. Next slide, Jayme, please. They had actually done quite a bit to provide food and provide shelter in the empty casinos when things were shut down for COVID. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jayme to bring us home with a little story about Starbucks.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, so Starbucks is a fascinating company because they've really, in just the space of a couple of decades, ingrained themselves into American culture, right? Used to go into the coffee shop for a cup of coffee. Now we go to Starbucks and $5, $6, $7 for a cup of coffee. But how do they make that work? You know, they have a very strong social agenda behind what they do. In fact, they call it Starbucks social impact. So, you know, they're not just selling you a cup of coffee, they're selling you a cup of values, corporate values, which allows them to not only have, you know, a presence around the world, but charge substantially more for their product and have a very strong brand affinity with their customers. You know, as I was looking at this, I'm looking at what they have on their website, and you know, it's part of their marketing approach. You know, we're not just talking about the coffee, we're talking about the philosophy of giving back to the communities. I'm just going to quickly read from it. On their website, they very much highlight Starbucks social impact. So this is smart, right? If I want to know more about Starbucks or find a Starbucks, I go to their website, and here they're telling me what they believe in and how they give back. They say, what is the role and responsibility for a for-profit public company? We have always believed Starbucks can and should have a positive social impact on the communities we serve. One person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time. And then they break that down by ethically and sustainably sourcing the coffee and the foods that they bring you. So that's a big issue. You know, check a box right there. Creating opportunities through education, training, and employment for all employees. This is the company which several years ago, when they had issues of racism in one of their stores, shut down the whole chain for several days to do diversity training. Huge commitment, but that was a commitment that they obviously believed in. Leading green retailing, committing to minimizing their environmental footprint. Wow. Strengthening communities. We are committed to offering Starbucks as a place for public conversation, elevating civic engagement. And then they go on to list, their social impact programs, their sustainable water programs. It's brilliant. They obviously believe in this stuff, but because of that, they don't just have a reputation, they have a brand that is based on a set of strong beliefs. And people see an affinity with Starbucks and are willing to drive a little bit farther. I don't know if you live in Concord, wait a little bit longer in that drive-through lane, and certainly pay a lot more than you would at Dunkin' Donuts. But I don't know if anybody's on the call from Dunkin' Donuts. What do you associate in terms of corporate giving with Dunkin' Donuts? I don't have anything off the top of my mind. I'm sure they do good things, but Starbucks, it's top of mind. It is their brand. It's brilliant, and they're a pioneer. Now, I realize that this is a big company, and many of the folks in the calls are small organizations, but we can learn from these organizations because they've invested time and they've invested money to come up with these policies. So another one, which is an interesting.
Before you leave that one though, Jayme, the one thing I did want to point out in this one that I think is interesting, big company, but they don't donate to any of the political candidates directly or support the PACs, but they do spend money lobbying on policies that are specifically targeted to immigration, employee mental health benefits, and civic engagement. Again, a really focused approach. And I love too that they provided Lyft services to their employees to get them to the polls. So those are what I would call some real strong behavioral indicators that they are trying to shape policy for America.
And what I like about that is, there's walking the walk and talking the talk, that they are actually living their values. They don't just do it as, as window dressing. This is who they are. I genuinely believe that this is who they are. And that makes me have an affinity towards this company. And certainly, I mean, and I'm sure people are thinking out there, are we, in the next point, well, I think we'll get to that as well. Are they turning anybody off with this? Yeah, maybe, probably, sure. But they're connecting with so many more people because of it, and they're being true to their values. I know we just had another question. I'm just going to draw it up quickly if I can. Hold on, let me just get back down here before we go to the next one. All right, well, I'm just going to go to the next slide, and then I'll drop the next question because I know that, sorry, it's not coming up for me. Do you see the question on the screen, Robin? Question 2? You're muted.
Let me read that to you. This person is saying it may or may not be the place for this question. Starbucks, nice that they're doing so many social responsibility practices, saving the planet, but they still build facilities with drive-through lanes where there are usually extensive numbers of people waiting in line with their cars running, and that adds to the pollution problem. People may cast that point off as insignificant, but it does have a huge local impact, and in the long run, it can improve all of their other efforts. So it seems like a simple thing they could do and walk the talk while they do it, was the comment.
And that's a really good comment. I mean, I'm sure you agree that, hey, it's impossible to do everything, but once you're in, you got to be all in. So I'd be curious, and it'd be interesting to look at, even ask Starbucks, what are they doing to address the issues of drive-through? What are they doing, to encourage people, not to spend so much time in their cars?
Maybe they should put that out to their customers. And honestly, they do have a pretty good program where they reach out to customers and say, if you have a good idea, we're all in. And that's how the whole program started, with their putting your name on the coffee cup sleeve, not the actual coffee cup, but because people tend to get the same kind of coffee all the time. So it's like you've got your sleeve and you recycle it and you use it every time. And pretty much every morning you've decided to get, a latte with almond milk or something. So I bet if you raise that to them, they would put it back out there and see if some folks out there would have some creative ideas on that one.
I think you're right. And I think it also goes to the point, when you're getting into greater exploring social responsibility causes, getting your employees, getting your staff, getting your colleagues involved, to think it through. And sometimes, research is the best place to start. It isn't an afterthought. It should be part of the conversation, because things will pop up. There will be questions. So to have like a frequently asked questions list and preparing yourselves for questions like the one that was just very wisely asked, having an answer ready, prepared and ready to go so that you can address it, and having a way to engage people around an issue like that so that you can learn as well. I think one of the things that any organization, individual or corporation, can say is we don't have all the answers all the time. And so that's why having a dialogue is so important, but being prepared to listen and answer can avoid unpleasant misunderstandings. So we'll wrap up with this case study, and then we'll open it for questions and reflections, because we'd love to hear what you're thinking out there. I thought this is interesting because I'm in my early 50s, and when I grew up, everybody wore blue jeans, right? And it was interesting because I remember in the 70s and 80s we had the whole designer jeans thing, and suddenly my blue jeans had status. They had been cool in the 50s because of James Dean, and then they kind of became kind of chic because of Gloria Vanderbilt. But there was always Levi's. That's the progenitor of the segment, right? Blue jeans started with Levi's. If you said, what was the first brand? It was Levi's. But the last couple decades were not kind to Levi's, because we've seen it. The younger people stopped wearing blue jeans as much as they did in generations past. And in some circles, they kind of got a fuddy-duddy kind of branding image around it, which is always very dangerous for a brand, right? Nobody wants to be the next Oldsmobile, which had its rocket V8s back in the 60s. And it was like the last car you drove back in the 80s. So you don't want to make that jump in terms of branding and lose your market. So Levi's had a problem, and they realized that the challenge for them was to get young people to wear their brand again. And was a really interesting article in the Wall Street Journal looking at Levi's and comparing them to Wrangler. What they decided that they would do is connect. I mean, they had the product, right? They've always had the product. There's nothing wrong with their product. So it wasn't on a marketing point of view. It was on a social action and intervention level. So just like Starbucks, they looked at their company and they said, okay, can we be environmentally better? Can we have a smaller footprint? Can we pay our workers more? Can we pay better wages? Can we give back? Can we help people vote? And they've actually even gone beyond Starbucks in some levels and spoken out for progressive causes, like LGBTQ plus rights and immigration issues, which don't unite all Americans. And what's interesting is that because they've done this, they've been able to build a stronger market share with younger people, pre-millennials, right? The whoever's following the millennials into the market, and created an affinity because they are very socially conscious. They do have these issues in their head. And when they see a company like Levi's doing this, the whole thing of James Dean wearing Levi's in the 50s, they don't know what that is. But they do see Levi's now as a socially responsible company that shares their values. What's interesting is their big competitor, Wrangler, through a lack of doing these things and investing in being at rodeos and car shows, has drawn a very different audience. And so in many ways, as we can say that America has been a nation divided on so many political and other personal beliefs, we show that division by what type of blue jeans we wear. So if you're wearing Levi's, you're in one camp. If you're wearing Wranglers, you might be in the other. Me, I used to get my jeans at Sears, so I don't know what that says about me. But I will say, this is a company that has put its investment at a level of what its beliefs and been able to regain market shares. But be careful, when you take on socially kind of, tinderous causes, you can drive people away. And we've seen that with companies, from Hobby Lobby to, the place that does the chicken tenders. Chick-fil-A. Thank you.
Yeah.
Or Domino's Pizza many years ago. That you don't want to get a negative buzz. So it's a very, very difficult path to walk and takes a great deal of research, I think, in marketing precision. And I wouldn't recommend that for any certain organizations or anybody out there who's just going to do this casually, because the benefits may be outweighed by the potential negatives, and then the distraction from mission and who you are. So Robin, any final thoughts on that before I know we've got about 15 minutes left, open it to questions from our folks on the line.
Yeah, I guess I would just wrap up or conclude by saying, if you don't have a social responsibility policy, you might want to think about getting one. If for no other reason, if you're an organization that wants to kind of filter out the kind of requests you're getting, that will be helpful there. And it'll, on the other hand, too, it's very helpful to your nonprofit partner, so they can sort of see what you stand for and where a likely match might lie. I think some of the strongest programs not only give where they get, but they have some kind of connection to, what is being done. Like I always use the example of the Lions Club, they have become known for all the work that they do with eyeglasses, or, if your business is books, if your Borders or something like that, are you going to engage in any kind of program where you're helping to do reading in the schools or any of those kinds of things? And that does bring me to one other point that I did want to make, because there are lots of organizations already out there that might be doing the perfect social responsibility project that you say, this aligns right with our company. So rather than establishing our own signature event or our own, little niche, we're going to partner with Habitat for Humanities, because they're already so well known for home building, for example. Our firm, when we were 35 years old, and we're now over 60 years old, but back when we were 35 years old, the founder of our firm, Pat Jackson, was very much committed to our professional association, PRSA, the Public Relations Society of America, and also the fact that our firm has this niche where we're very involved in anything that has to do with behavior. So his thought was, we need to incent people to contribute to the body of knowledge around behavioral public relations and any of the behavioral sciences. So on our 35th anniversary, and we're a small firm, by the way, but on our 35th anniversary, we gave $35,000 symbolically to the PRSA Foundation to establish something called the JJNW Behavioral Science Prize. And it's a perfect alignment with what we do for work. And it's been something that kind of continues on throughout the years. All these years, people have won the award. Typically, they will do some kind of presentation at our international conference, or they'll share their paper or their work. And so that's a good example of how even a smaller company can make a bigger splash if there's an area where you just say, that's our area and it doesn't exist, so we're going to create it.
Robin, I see we have a third question if you want to read it.
Sure. Hold on for just a minute.
I do agree. And I think, asking your customers, your stakeholders, your shareholders, what they care about is a really important step on the path to getting this kind of stuff right.
This wasn't actually a question. It was more just a nice comment. Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. We look forward to working with you again soon. So,
week. I'm sure.
But are there any other questions, or people want to offer perhaps their experiences? Emily, I'll let you handle that.
Well, I just want to remind everyone to submit a question. You click on Q&A, either tap your phone or move your mouse a little bit. It'll pop up and you can just type it in from there. I do have a question though. So when talking about employee volunteer efforts, I mean, we're talking more big picture here, but can you speak a little bit to the nitty gritty of like, how do you encourage your employees to do this without forcing them or making it awkward?
Yeah, and I mean, I'll take a first stab at it and then you can jump in, Jayme. It's not going to be a forced thing where it's going to be required, right? But we always talk about the fact that in any organization, you've got at least 10% of that population are what I would call the engaged and involved automatically. I mean, those are the people that are going to sign up for your task forces, or if you're going to have some kind of town hall meeting, they're going to be the ones to submit their questions, and they're going to be those people. So we talk a lot in our business about identifying or spotlighting the opinion leaders who are kind of, the people leading the charge, and there are internal opinion leaders. And, a lot of the times it starts with them. It starts with those people that get really excited about an idea. And the best kind of programs, if you're throwing it out there, I'm sure Timberland does this, is to, get some ideas from the people on the front lines. And have them say, gee, this is something we have a lot of energy around, whether it's the garden thing that they did, or they actually also, in addition to those 40 hours, they actually have something where they will give employees a leave of absence. For example, the hurricanes, if someone felt compelled to go down and work on the relief after a disaster, they have a program where they will support employees to do that. So I think that if you get those opinion leaders involved at the beginning, and heck, you can create a task force to let those folks come up with some of those ideas. And we all know that we get behind the ideas that we actually have a stake in. So that is one strategy if you're just starting. Jayme?
I would add one thing and then check. I think we have a fourth and a fifth question. If you want to take a look at those, I'll quickly add while you're digging those up. Don't forget, we live in, despite all this going on, a very tight employment market here in New Hampshire. And, companies can offer competing salaries, but what they often don't offer is competing values. And if you've got something that resonates with your employees, makes them feel good about working for your nonprofit or your for-profit or your utility or your bank, that's a way of employee retention, because you have to feel good about your job and the organization you work at to want to stay there and want to actually be involved. So don't look at it like, oh, we're going to force people. No, we're going to listen to our staff. We're going to see what they care about. We're going to find ways to reflect that caring in our values and what we do. And we're going to empower them to give back. I think that's a smart employee retention and attracting tool to make people feel really good about who you are because you care about something.
And to that, Jayme, and I'll just add that I happen to be the owner of 2 millennials that work for the same company, and they are all about, if the company's doing something, they're gonna sign up for that. They are actually, you had mentioned Whole Foods, and my daughter in particular is a devoted Whole Food shopper, and even though it costs a little bit more, but that is definitely what's happening. But I do want to read this question. Longer view, is this really sustainable practice for business, or is this just a flash in the pan for the next few years? What causes you to believe this time it's going to stick and be a sustainable practice, or is it just program of the month? Certainly for Timberlands and the Patagonias and the Starbucks, it's their mission and their passion, but that's a small sample of the retail marketplace. Is it sustainable? And so that is a great question. And I would absolutely advocate against program of the month. I mean, I think if you're going to do that, that's when you're going to, and I don't care whether you're talking about corporate social responsibility or anything else that you just sort of introduce and keep pivoting away from, you're not going to build that. Number one, you're not going to build a reputation for supporting this type of thing, whatever it is that your thing is. So it really does have to be a longer term commitment. And I think in terms of asking, is it going to stick? Well, that's why you design something that is fit for you. And, a lot of people on this call don't have the budgets or the person power that Timberland and Starbucks and some of them, but you probably do have it that the CNA stores have, right? They have a small employee base, and they came up with some of these programs on their own. And very much it is a part of the culture. And I think it is not going to be genuine unless it is truly part of your culture and you're preaching it internally and you're showing it externally. So that would be my thought.
I agree. I think this is something that's been brewing for many years. We can think of McDonald's and Ronald McDonald House. It's not like this is a new thing. It just there's a heightened awareness now, and we've seen some fascinating pivots. A company like Subaru, whose sales have really exploded over the last decade, a lot of their advertising now isn't just about their cars. It's how when you buy a Subaru, they give money to a cause you care about. That's a fundamental change. And when you're looking at a Subaru versus a Toyota, that little bit might push you over the edge. So think about your own community. It could be making dinner at the Friendly Kitchen. It could be doing a cleanup of a park. It could be partnering with the Boys and Girls Club. There's so many ways that you can show that we care about our community. Yes, people are asking those questions right now, but I don't think they're going to stop asking those questions. I think it's just a little thing that gives you that this little bit competitive advantage. And when we think about the companies that do good, those companies are actually able, for the most part, to charge more for their products because you're not, as we saw in that research we started off with, you're not simply buying a product, you're buying a contribution to society. And I think that's where not everybody, but many people are right now, especially where a lot of commerce and transactions have moved online. And there really is a certain leveler because you don't have the ability to have a beautiful store or a wonderful facility. You're dealing with a website. Websites change and get updated. So brand matters more online than it did, physically. So no, I don't think this goes away. I think it evolves and grows, but I think it's the way forward, not the way back.
Yeah, and I do think there's a lot, if you just do a little research in your communities. My husband has a local business, Edward Jones, here in Amesbury, Massachusetts, and he's involved in the local Rotary, and they have a great Readers Are Leaders program with the schools. So that's something that already exists, that it's real easy to just say, hey, that's, we're an organization that is affiliated with education. So we're going to let our employees go into the schools, and it's literally a half hour a week. I've done it for many years, and read to a kid. Like that's, you don't have to create these things that are huge and expensive and overwhelming. You can start small.
You can, and working with the community, doing good things for companies that or organizations that can compete in that level playing field. It's also a way to kind of go outside of what you do and talk about your commitment to giving back. So, I think it's something everybody should look at. I think it's something that really can differentiate. And again, in difficult times, when all we're inundated with is just bad, tough to digest news, a little bit of hope, a little bit of something positive. I think we're looking for that. And that's unfortunately the reason I think a lot of people are tuning out right now from media and newscasts. They just don't want more bad news. There's nothing wrong with embracing hope. There's nothing wrong with embracing good news. And most of all, I think it empowers from the inside. It goes to your employees, your stakeholders, and they feel good too. So I think, love and kindness can be addictive, and it really, it's going to help us all move forward. And I want to say to the chamber, which I'm a member, thank you for letting us share the airwaves this morning. This has been a really good discussion. And as always, Robin, I enjoy spending time with you because you are a really smart person, and I learn a lot just listening to you.
Well, it's a team effort, and thank you very much, Emily, for having us, and for all of you that tuned in. And as I say, if there are other questions that occur to you later, which sometimes happens, our contact information is right here. Or if anyone would like a copy of a policy or any of that kind of thing, just get in touch with us.
Great. Well, thank you both so much. I thought this was a really interesting presentation, and as a millennial myself, I think you hit the nail on the head with the things I consider when, making purchases or working with businesses. But I'm going to take over the screen share for just a second and share some chamber news real quick before we end here. So I want to tell you about an upcoming networking event we have planned. This is taking place on Remo, and I have this weird picture on screen here because this is what those events actually look like. You see tables, chairs, tiny little profile pictures and icons of friends or people that you may be looking to meet. And you can actually double click on the table and you appear in a video chat room with those people. You can leave that room and go to a different table anytime you want. It's a lot of fun. And it's been very, very popular with our members at recent events. So if you'd like to attend this, it is, there's no cost. So sign up. It's fun, it's quick, you know, you're going to get to know our host, New Hampshire Federal Credit Union, that does a lot of educational programming in the community. So take a look at that. We also have a forum coming up on May 13th, sponsored by Unitil. And shout out to Gary Miller. I know you're watching this webinar today, so thank you for that. And this may be of special interest to all of you who were part of today's discussion, because this addresses a lot of issues that many companies are looking to advocate for and change. So I would take a look at this. It has a very, very popular guest speaker we've hosted many times before. Jeff Fuhrer was the former executive vice president at the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, and this topic is really his passion now. So I really recommend that you sign up to attend this. Again, no cost. It's easy to join online. And then finally, I just want to mention, we've announced the retirement of a beloved chamber staff member, Kathy Bacon. So we are actually hiring right now for a manager of membership services. So if you know of someone who would be interested in applying for that role, you can learn more on our website. So those are my updates. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Jayme, so much for today's presentation. And do reach out to them if you have further questions. They're a great resource, and so happy to have you guys today.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks.
Take care.